Coming up, the New York Football Giants fall flat on their faces. Stop me if you've heard this story before. A 30-7 loss at the hands of the Buccaneers. And now players are not so impressed with the organization. We dive in on it all coming up next. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your host. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Mackowitz. We're healthy, wealthy, and wise, and talking about the New York Football Giants losing 30-7 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now 2-9. Oh, by the way, they're also 0-6 at home, in case you're wondering. Andy, how are we on a Monday morning?
I mean, that pretty much says it all, right? The Giant fans have not seen a win at home this year. I mean, we can get into what the future holds and if you want to even see a win at home this year. But, Adam, I think like every crazy fan, I go through a whole week having the rational thoughts in my head. And then when I wake up in the morning and I make myself breakfast on Sunday, I turn around and I say, if you squint hard enough, I can see how the Giants are going to win this game and how it's all going to turn around. And I do it every single week, Adam. And it feels like Groundhog's Day. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is for the Giants. The Giants just looked absolutely horrible. Talk to me. Hit me with it. What are you thinking about from this loss?
Yeah, I didn't come in thinking the Giants could win this football game, though I understand the irrational nature of it. Because, by the way, I wasn't like far off. It was just the idea of, can this team play well, right? Can they come out and show you something? And I think the biggest thing at a very high level is just, okay, you go through everything with Daniel Jones. By the way, if you want to go watch the live stream that I did on Sunday morning, hour long, I'm talking chef's kiss in terms of what I went through, the journey I took everyone on from the very highest levels of John Mara all the way down to the coaching staff and the players. But you come into this game, and I think the real concern here, and we're going to talk about Dable more in depth later, is you got to come out and show that Daniel Jones was the problem, that he was so much of what was holding back this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And it doesn't mean winning the game. It just means showcase what you're capable of doing. Now, you get injuries across the offensive line in this one too, Illuminor, et cetera. We get that. But bottom line is, for me, when you come out of a game 30-7, when it's statement time, even if ultimately you want and the entire organization wants to tank and wants to lose football games, you need to take 1 week here just to show what you're capable of. And you can still lose the game, by the way, in the end. And instead, I think what it came down to for me was, as you and I've talked about throughout the course of the season, you want to sit there and you always want to point to this one player, to this one issue, to this one GM, to this one head coach, to this one owner. But when you keep removing pieces and you keep pointing to that one thing as being the issue, you turn around and you find out and you realize that there's issues everywhere and that the issues for this organization is more than any one individual player. And that, to me, is what was crystallized on Sunday and what's been crystallized for the last handful of weeks. Let's be clear.
Yeah, Adam, I couldn't agree with you more. What the few things that I thought were, and things, multiple things can be true about this situation. I think you said it best. The way that I describe it is, we realized that yesterday showed me that Daniel Jones was a problem the Giants had because his quarterback play was not good enough, but he was not the problem. Like we should not be disillusioned that removing that one problem was the key to victory. And we're going to get into the comments that the team made as well after the loss. Adam, it kind of feels like the team felt the same way in that regard, where they're kind of like, all week they're like, listen to all these delusional teammates like supporting Daniel Jones, saying like, we think he's the best quarterback on the roster. You hear all of that from all the players, and the initial reaction is, were you watching the same game that I was? Because Daniel Jones looked terrible. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
We removed Daniel Jones. We clearly got answers on Tommy DeVito not necessarily being a guy that you could think be here long-term as a backup or whatever it is. But Adam, it wasn't even that the offense was futile, because it was, and clearly we could not move the ball, but it was surprising to see how the defense quit. Like the missed tackles, the sloppy play, the penalties, it looked like Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, and White were running all over the Giants. And so for me, were you surprised that not that we lost the game? I think we both were kind of like, oh, okay, a loss at this point in the year isn't a bad thing. But it seems like, and this is the question I'll turn to you, does it matter how the Giants lose? Or do you just want them to lose every game and whatever you're seeing is just window dressing?
So just briefly on the Tommy DeVito of it all, 21-31, buck 89, you isolate that little stat line. You go, oh, it's not that bad, completion percentage, etc. But again, eye test tells you a different story. He took a massive sack really early in the game, which was just a reminder of 37 sacks that he had last season when he came in relief in conjunction with Tyrod Taylor when Daniel Jones went down with the injury, and a 14.8 QBR, something else that when you go back and look at last season, in spite of some good-looking stats, QBR tells you another story. And that's unfortunate for him. I want Tommy DeVito to play well. I want him to create a conversation around what the future looks like at the quarterback position. So just to tie a bow, kind of on the game itself, am I surprised by the lack of effort or conviction? Well, you can go by Dexter Lawrence, who said, well, it wasn't a lack of effort, but it was bad tackling. We got some expletives. They beat the S out of us, all that stuff. Why would I be surprised by this? Dexter Lawrence was drafted in the same draft class, in the same round as Daniel Jones. He's in year number 6 with this franchise. He has had the exact same journey of not being competitive, of not being able to win football games, of playing really well individually, but not having a team that collectively can get across the line and wins, get across the line into the playoffs, and get across the line of being a team that's respected around the league. When you make the decision around Daniel Jones, and you mentioned even Malik Nabers mentioned Daniel Jones and his response as far as his play, and we'll get to him and the ball getting his way. I think that even if Daniel Jones, who we'll talk about a little bit more this week because there's a lot of buzz around where he's going to land potentially, even if Daniel Jones is not a franchise quarterback, which I think we agree he's not, it seems like the consensus around the Giants organization is no matter what you think any player is, they're worse off for being here and being a part of this team. Like that to me is the takeaway, that the entire collective, the roster is looking at this and saying, yeah, it's all bad. It's all dysfunctional. So when you wave the white flag on a season, players are going to wave the white flag. Like I don't know any other way that you expect it to happen. So if anyone's going to sit here and judge Dexter Lawrence or judge a player that pulls off of a tackle now at this point, like, hey, you still want the effort and all those good things. Why am I going to hold it against players for how they go out on Sunday when every indication is this team wants to lose games, doesn't want to see anybody make big plays necessarily because they are thinking about the offseason, who they're going to get out of here, and what it's going to look like going forward. So this is what happens. You have to expect this to happen. Doesn't make an excuse for it, but I'm also not going to hold it against players if they check out over the back half of this season.
Well, see, you and I disagree in that part because the whole idea of the coaching staff is you got to hold this thing together. Like that's their responsibility.
Oh, no. That's player level. I'm talking about on the player level. So whose problem is it that the players aren't committed and don't have the conviction and aren't galvanizing after you make a big decision about your quarterback and you bench them, then you release them, et cetera, et cetera? No, 100%. If this team came out and showed conviction and showed effort and energy and hustle, and in the post game said, hey, listen, it's a grind and we're struggling, but we're a team and we're fighting through this and we're going to see this season out. That would tell me that Brian Daboll has the locker room, right? That Shane Bowen has the defensive unit, and then it's all being held together. Instead, it only took this one game, this one moment for all of a sudden, and all the players started just, and key ones among them started being vocal about how they feel about things. That's indicative of the state of this team and the state of this coaching staff.
I just kept thinking, Dan Campbell's press conference when he became the head coach of the Lions about biting kneecaps and things like that, everyone was like, wow, this guy is really far out there. And then his team takes on that identity where they're aggressive, they play hard. Do you think in the worst times with Dan Campbell as the coach that his team would quit on him the way that they just quit on Shane Bowen and Brian Daboll in this game?
Man, it's super, here's the thing. It's super rare that when teams are bad, that in the end, it doesn't end up being reflective of everything, and it can kind of start to peter apart. A good example would be Tom Coughlin with the Giants, right? At the end of his tenure, it was, well, we're at the end of this road and we need to make a change. By the way, speaking of mistakes, right? Hate to lose Ben McAdoo to some other team. Let's make this call a year or two early. That was difficult because the track record of success was there. So Dan Campbell, when you bring him up, well, that team, the Detroit Lions, is having a renaissance of their franchise with Dan Campbell as the head coach. So it's obviously going to impact it. The only thing right now you hang your hat on with Brian Daboll as the head coach is we went to the playoffs. the first year that you were here, when then everyone starts to talk about with other players from other previous regimes, right? So that is the difference to me. Success breeds confidence. Success breeds support, right? So you're going to have those things are tied together. So no, I do not think Detroit players would turn, even if this thing bottomed out for the Lions over the next season or two with Dan Campbell, because they've already had that success and a sustained level of success where at the end you would say, maybe it didn't work out, but it's not for a lack of effort. It's not for a lack of coaching. It's not for a lack of what we do on the field on Sundays.
Yeah, that's kind of what my point is like, hey, listen, it's not going to be because everybody quit. It's going to be because we just don't have enough talent on the field to win football games, and that's fine. Now, Adam, what this game made me start thinking about, and obviously you look around the entire league on Sunday, and it could not have been worse for the Giants, right? The Giants were
no. Hold on. If you're going to bring up the other former Giants, don't do that yet. We're going to do that this week. We're going to talk about all the other Giants that aren't here and how it reflects on not only the organization, but also Joe Schoen. So just to give you, you can tease it, but I don't want to get into the Saquon Barkley and the Xavier McKinney and the Julian Loves and the everybody else's just yet.
Well, but the reason why I'm pointing to that is because directionally, everyone sees all these players leave the building and they're like, wow, really talented players going out the door. And philosophically, the GM has a path that he wants to take. Same thing happens with Daniel Jones. For all of us that thought his play wasn't good enough on the field, the players know that it was a business decision that Daniel Jones is no longer the quarterback. You know why?
Yes.
Because we just saw Tommy DeVito play, and that's not it. We know that Drew Lock was skipped over for Tommy DeVito. That just tells you everything you need to know about how Drew Lock has looked in practice. And so when you sit here and you think about how the Giants have gotten here, I won't go down that path that you mentioned before, but where do the Giants turn? Because it feels like they've pointed the finger in a lot of different directions at him to say, we can't do this. We can't have this guy here. We can't have this quarterback. But it still remains the same that this team is not competitive the way it's currently constructed. So, does this loss to you change anything for the rest of the next 6 weeks of the season?
Of course it does. Yeah, of course it does. The New York Football Giants were 2-8. Coming out of the game in Germany against the Carolina Panthers, an incredibly disappointing loss. And we had conversations about, okay, you can say vote of confidence from John Mara, but how you perform the rest of the season is going to matter. Now, I keep bringing up the tacit potential agreement that was struck by GM and ownership of, we're going to be bad this year. Deal with it. Publicly, it's going to be brutal, but don't worry. The problem is what you did bring up about the decision-making of the GM. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up this Malik Nabers quote, and then I'm going to surprise people in the way in which I criticize it. So Malik Nabers said, coming out of this game, first, second quarter, I don't get the ball. Start getting targets at the end. I mean, I can't do nothing. Start getting the ball when it's 30-0. What do you want me to do? And then, which he said before, I believe this season already, talk to Dabes about that in terms of why he doesn't get the ball earlier. They come up to me and they ask me what plays I want, and that was that. I don't know. He also said, talking about using Tommy DeVito, which I don't have. Oh, no, I do have it here. Obviously, it ain't the quarterback, Nabers said. Same outcome when we had DJ at quarterback. Take a look. It ain't the quarterback. So all of that points to coaching, head coach, what's going on here, play calling. Now, I do not begrudge Malik Nabers for being vocal about this. I am not judging him for talking the way that he did after this game and for calling out the coaching staff. The tidbit about the quarterback is notable and is interesting. Doesn't mean that Malik Nabers was a massive fan of Daniel Jones as the quarterback. It just means that he feels like there was no real good option at quarterback. But I go back to, if you knew this team was going to be bad, or if you thought that the process was going to take longer, drafting Malik Nabers when you drafted him is going to go down as a mistake, because you need to have the number one wide receiver to have success in this league. We know that. But you don't know what's going to happen in next year's draft. You don't know if that's going to be the quarterback that you're going to be able to get there at the top. And 6 more weeks of this, you can lose a lot of things, including your number one wide receiver, who might already be on his way to checking out on what this franchise is capable of. And when you hear Dexter Lawrence speak about it too, that trickles down. He is one of the leaders of this team. He is one of the best players on this roster. When you hear the way he speaks about it, again, I don't think we're far off from having conversations where there's behind closed doors discussions from veteran talent on this team saying, is this the best spot for me? maybe I would be better off somewhere else because the dysfunction is so rampant. And that goes back up to Joe Schoen. It is reflective of players that have left, where you allocated money, and the results that you've gotten on the field.
Adam, it's funny that you went maybe we shouldn't have taken a number one wide receiver route if we thought this was the path that the team was going to take. What I took away from Malik Nabers' quotes, which were like not surprising, but more like, wow, he said the quiet part out loud, to me was like, whoa, what, but you could tell that all the players in the locker room feel the exact same way. He's not he's not sitting on an island by himself. You heard Dexter Lawrence say it, as you mentioned before. They're like, he's the best quarterback on the roster. I don't understand why he's gone. But you can see that the team is saying all this stuff to each other. What I realized in Malik Nabers saying the quiet part out loud is that there's no accountability right now. There is zero accountability in that locker room, because someone like Malik Nabers, who's a rookie, would never say what he said if there was a cohesive internal team that like knew what was going on. Instead, Malik Nabers says, I don't know if this coach is going to be here. I don't have to like mince words. I'm not going to get benched for a quarter because our team is a tire fire if I say something wrong. And so when there's no accountability, you get these brutally honest quotes from rookies. Malik Nabers is a rookie and he's coming out and saying this. And it shows like who's in charge? Who's in charge of this program? Who's in charge of the team? Who's in charge of getting everybody to make sure they're on the same page? Who's in charge of the game plan? Who's in charge of the team being competitive? Malik Nabers said the quiet part out loud, which was like, we don't have a direction. You can put 27 different quarterbacks in that spot. It ain't going to change a thing. And you could tell that he was very, very frustrated at more than just the quarterback being poor and not getting him the ball. There is way more that's going on. And he felt comfortable enough that like there's going to be no repercussions to be able to say all of that out in public.
Of course. And as soft as F was the other quote from him. Beat the S out of us was Dexter Lawrence in terms of how the Buccaneers handled this team. And that's what I mean. Like, yeah.
Question for you. Just with what Malik Nabers said, do you disagree with what he said at all when he's like, I didn't see the ball until we were down 25-0 in the second half? Like, if that was the game plan for us to win, like, what are we doing? You drafted me number one overall. Like, didn't you think that they would get him involved, like bubble screen, reverse hand, like get him the ball early so that he's happy? And yet they had Tommy DeVito passing the ball all over the place and taking sacks to everyone other than Malik Nabers.
Well, let's go ahead and remind everybody that on a 4th and 1 early in this game, when they decided to go for it, the strategy was Wan'Dale Robinson on a sweeping run with Tyrone Tracy Jr. in the ball game and in the backfield. That was the strategy there. So it's funny, man, because this gets us to the Brian Daboll piece of it. And again, just on Malik Nabers, that type of you want kind of that type of frustration. Sometimes it spills over a little bit too much. That's somebody that's sitting here saying like, I don't want to be losing football games. This is not what, I didn't do what I did at LSU to come into the league and then find myself 2.5 quarters into a game going, am I going to see the ball at all? And there's something here about Brian Daboll and a bravado or an overconfidence or some type of conviction that he can out-scheme the opposition, that he is, as was talked about coming in here from Buffalo, a QB whisperer that can do these things. And I just think that this is the problem that we're going to see down the stretch of this season. And I don't believe that Brian Daboll's job is safe, obviously. And we've already seen a lot of fans calling out for this. I said this on Sunday morning. I believe that for the last handful of weeks, maybe even coming into the season, depending on how you want to look at it, there has been a fracture between GM and head coach. I think that Brian Daboll looks at Joe Schoen, who may be his buddy, but looks at him and says, you've made massive mistakes and put me at a real disadvantage. And I am not above showing you that it's your fault, not mine. I'm not entirely convinced that the way Brian Daboll calls games is more about showcasing what they don't have on this team than it is about trying to make what they have work. Like because I think he's in not my fault territory, because he's going to move on from this and he's going to go on to be an offensive coordinator somewhere else if he gets fired. And he wants it. Maybe if I'm going to save my job, if I'm going to stay the head coach, it's going to be because Joe Schoen made the mistakes. And now maybe I'll get a little more say in how we shop for the groceries going into next season.
Adam, think about if that is even slightly true. Think about how dysfunctional the Giants actually are. If that's true, if it's not, let's get creative and throw the kitchen sink at this to try to win football games. And instead it's
They
like,
have never once, to be clear, their kitchen sink moments this entire year have almost never worked out. When they every time that they have tried to be tricky this year, it has never worked out for them. And that again just speaks to, if you're Brian Dable, know your team, know your personnel. They aren't, this is not trick play New York Football Giants. This is Tyrone Tracy Jr. has shocked everyone by being so good this season. Let's be north and south runners. Let's try to control time of possession. They did it for a few games this year, but every time they need to draw up something that's going to surprise and wow the defense, more often than not, the other team goes, holy crap, they just ran right into us. 4th down, great turnover. Thanks so much. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, even think about Tyrone Tracy. You know, it's tough when players fumble. Obviously, he's got to get that corrected as soon as possible. But even on that fumble that he had, they have Tommy DeVito going out wide. They're doing a whole wildcat thing. It's like, I don't know, he's getting 6 to 7 yards a carry. Maybe let's just hand it off traditionally and let him run through the line. Like, and we'll get everybody like reps instead of putting our quarterback out at wide receiver. Like, to me, like to your point, those trick plays, they just don't work. They're not fooling anyone. Everyone knew exactly what was happening anyway. And so, yes, it is frustrating to me. I mean, it is embarrassing too. You know, Baker Mayfield scores that touchdown. He does the Tommy DeVito celebration and basically is mocking and laughing at the fact that the Giants have Tommy DeVito at quarterback when our 3rd string quarterback is getting mocked by other quarterbacks mid-game.
Well, he's our number 1 starter right now. How dare you?
Well, he is our number 1 starter, but he has been the 3rd string quarterback for 8 weeks of the season.
Number 1 on the depth chart, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep going back to the players know that Jones was, even though he was not good, he gave them the best chance to win. They have gotten him off the roster, and the team doesn't believe. I don't think that the players around Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito believe that the GM and the coach are doing everything they can for the team to be succceptible. Because
of course not.
If that were the case, they would bring in another quarterback to be able to do something. So like it goes back to your point, Adam. It's like everyone knows what's happening right now, and the players are voicing their frustration around it. And it's like, how do you expect this thing to stay together if you're making business decisions over there and you're lying to the face of the players that you're asking to play hard for you for?
And in the end, like, you know, the Daniel Jones piece of this, like from a player perspective, it's not about whether or not. If you asked, you know, blind taste test, is Daniel Jones the guy you want to be your franchise quarterback for the next decade? There'd be a lot of players that say, no, I don't think so. You know, rookie quarterback, whatever it may be. But from a player perspective, how they treat the starting quarterback, the franchise quarterback, the 6th overall draft pick quarterback, that matters. That resonates. How they treated benching him and then demoting him and then finally releasing him, mostly because it was bad PR, and that's why they then made that choice. All of that resonates with players, and it to me, it erodes the New York Football Giants are one of the gold standards, one of the blue chip franchises in the NFL, and you can always expect a certain level of values of player ownership, coach, GM, respect, even if it's hard times, even if it means we're going to cut you, release you, trade you, whatever it may be. We're always going to try to do right by you because that's what we believe in. And sometimes to your detriment, right? Sometimes where you feel like, if this organization was a little more cutthroat. But instead, when they choose to be, hey, tough decision and we're going to make it, they do it in the dumbest, clunkiest, most awkward way possible. And then they spend the next, whether it's 1 week or 6 years, trying to deflect and explain why all the missteps weren't really missteps, why all the issues weren't really issues, why the hard knocks, which we had control over what we were going to show you, ends up showing it. By the way, that's what they let you see. Imagine what else is going on there. They said, this is the best sample we can give you of what we're up to right now. That's only the tip of the iceberg of what's happening inside of this organization right now. And that permeates to the players.
You are totally right. And while we won't get into the longer term ramifications, that seems like you're totally right. It's a perfect midweek show to talk about, like, how do we even get here? But when you talk about players' loyalty to the organization eroding with decisions like Daniel Jones, look no further than what happened with Saquon Barkley to be like the first chip off the iceberg, where it's like, But you can understand them like making like doing a negotiation, but he was your best player. Everyone on the team knew that he was a freak athlete. He said he wanted to be here. He just wanted like kind of what the market was to be able to stay. And like you think about how they did Daniel Jones, and you look at all the stuff you saw in Hard Knocks with Saquon Barkley, and the team sits here and says, "We stink. We don't even pay our players that are the best players at their position half the time. And when times get tough, we are going to make silly decisions and get people out of here." Like to me, if you're a player on the team, you're like, what is going on around me? And that's kind of what Malik Nabers is saying. Like, what is this circus that's around me? Because it isn't what I had at LSU. This is not the type of football that I signed up for.
By the way, around the draft, there was the buzz and rumors that Malik Nabers didn't want to come, to the New York Giants, that he had his other preferred destinations. Could be based on QB play, organizational stability, all of those things, just opportunity to be in the bright lights, right? So it certainly does ring true. And the one thing I will say, as we talked about other former players, and you brought up Barkley, I said, let's, we can save that for how some of these decisions have been made and what it's looked like. But I'm gonna tell you, I think 3 things here. Might only be 2. We'll find out in a minute. 26 carries, 255 yards, and 2 touchdowns on Sunday for Saquon Barkley. He also had 4 catches for 47 yards. So he went for a 300-yard day, but 255 yards on the ground. He's been an absolute beast. Okay, not a mistake necessarily not have the running back around anymore. But if you're going to be a crap team, it wouldn't have hurt to have that player just there, right? But here's the other side of it. I'm so grateful that Saquon Barkley is a Philadelphia Eagle, because players don't deserve this. You don't deserve to get ground into the mud season over season, and at a certain point start to be ridiculed and talked about in a way by your own fan base as if you're the problem why this team can't win football games. So the fact that Saquon is going off to have a career year, is going to get talked about as an MVP of this season right now, great. He deserves that. And guess what? Dexter Lawrence will be talked about differently, even beyond everything that he did this season, especially early on, if he was on a team that was winning football games and going to the playoffs. It's kind of the way. I apologize because I'm bringing up a couple of these names here. It's why Xavier McKinney is getting talked about the way he's getting talked about in Green Bay, right? Like all of these things matter in such a big way that I'm even beyond the point of saying, and we'll talk about it, like what mistakes of Joe Shane? Okay, great, grand, wonderful. I'm just looking around the league and going, good for you, Xavier McKinney, because we got convinced by our organization that you maybe aren't worth spending the money on. Good for you to go and be that guy. Saquon Barkley, good for you. Finally, all of the work that you do in the off seasons and during the week and on Sundays is paying dividends, where everyone is looking at you and going, my God, you're one of the best running backs we've seen in a generation. Good for you. That's what it should be. And don't be shocked if at some point, whether it's this season or next year, we have some even lower level discussion about, good for you, Daniel Jones. You went and were a backup somewhere else, and you came in for a spot start, and you helped a playoff team win a football game down the run of the season. That's what this organization is doing. Breaking spirits, crushing dreams, and sending players for the hills when it comes to playing for this organization right now.
Adam, it's so funny.
Yes.
At the end of the day, Adam, I felt the same thing. I wasn't angry that Saquon Barkley was doing what he was doing. I'm like,
Why
no,
would you be?
I've seen it before. Like he's a tremendous and he's a freak athlete. But what I came away with was, have I been brainwashed? Like, have I been brainwashed by the front office to tell me like, oh no, Andy, positional value. Like, and so then I'm repeating it, and I'm totally okay with like our best player, our all pro walking out the door, because I'm like, you just can't pay that running back, even though he's like an all pro and may go for 2,500 yards. Like, have we been brainwashed? Like, I can't pay a safety that much. That's crazy. Like, even if they lead the league in interceptions, you can't have that. I'm sitting here and I'm like, why am I the puppet? Like, I'm the mouthpiece for the organization. Like, I feel like I have egg on my face, right? I don't know if you feel the same way, but I've been brainwashed to be like, no, this is the new way. This is the analytics. They allocation of money. And then all of a sudden we just see great players walking out the door and being great players other places. And I'm like,
Of course.
did I drink some kind of Kool-Aid that I don't remember? Like, what? How did we get here, Adam?
And it also, which we'll talk about in the middle of the week, reflects on what you're being sold, right? You're being told these players are not worth the money and we're not going to keep them around for various reasons. And those can be the right reasons. but who do you replace them with? You say that we're an organization that's always been in-house kind of guys when we talk about GMs and coaches, and that's the way we've been structured. But this time around, we're going outside. We're bringing in a young, fresh mind with fresh perspectives. So you buy into that there's been a turning of the leaf in that regard. And you did. But you may have just turned over another crappy leaf. Like you turned over another leaf that was about to crumble in your hands, and all of a sudden the winter snow is falling and you're standing outside without a jacket. Like it is, man. I think 100%. You buy into, because we've all been generational fans of this organization and of this team. You keep buying into it. But I'll leave you with what I said on Sunday. Going back to including Kerry Collins, which we almost dream of the days to have a Kerry Collins now, through Kurt Warner to Eli Manning. Our age group, it's been 20 years. You had a 20 years run of not having to question QB stability, QB play, and what that looks like. And the Daniel Jones situation, reflective of the organization overall, is also a reminder of, these are the dark days when you don't have the boxes checked at some of the most critical positions on your roster. And we're going to find out in short order over the rest of this season what that is going to look like for this team. Friends, that's what you call a post-game podcast. In case you're wondering, yes, the Giants played football on Sunday. They lost 30-7. We're going to talk about on Wednesday, how did we get here? We're going to bring up some of the key decisions from the offseason. Tomorrow, I may come in and just reflect on how well these other players are playing for other teams now that they don't play in New York. All of this will be covered not only over on YouTube, but also on the podcast feed. You get us wherever you get those needs fulfilled. You get Adam Armbrecht over on X. You get AMAC214 over there as well. And in the meantime, until the next time, until the best times, as Andrew Macklitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.